Imagine standing guard over a war that ended 3 decades ago. Imagine refusing to believe your country surrendered, refusing to believe the leaflets falling from the sky, refusing to believe your own family's letters because you were told, once, by a man you trusted completely, that you must never give up your post. Now imagine doing that for almost 29 years, hiding in jungles, eating stolen rice, dodging search parties sent to bring you home. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of Hiroo Onoda, the Japanese soldier who kept fighting World War II until 1974. To understand how this happened, we have to go back to December 1944. The war is already turning hard against Japan. American forces are island-hopping across the Pacific, and the Philippines is about to become one of the deadliest battlegrounds of the entire conflict. Onoda, a 22-year-old intelligence officer trained in guerrilla warfare and sabotage, is sent to a small island called Lubang, southwest of Manila. His job is to organize resistance behind enemy lines if the island falls. And before he leaves, his commanding officer gives him an order that will swallow the next 3 decades of his life. The order is simple, almost brutally so. You are forbidden to die by your own hand, and you are forbidden to surrender. No matter what happens, no matter how long it takes, you keep fighting until I personally come to relieve you of that duty. Onoda takes this seriously. Not casually seriously, completely, absolutely, religiously seriously. This is the culture he was raised in. Surrender is shame. An order is sacred. And so when American and Filipino forces storm Lubang just weeks later in February 1945, and most of the Japanese garrison is killed or captured, Onoda doesn't surrender. He retreats into the mountains with a handful of other soldiers, and he starts doing exactly what he was trained to do. Hit-and-run attacks, sabotage, survival in dense jungle terrain. Then in August 1945, Japan surrenders. The war for almost the entire planet is over. But Onoda doesn't know that, or more precisely, he refuses to accept it. Here's where the story turns from tragic to almost unbelievable. Leaflets are airdropped onto the island announcing Japan's surrender. Onoda and his men find them. They read them. And they conclude the leaflets are fake, Allied propaganda designed to trick them into walking out of the jungle so they can be captured or killed. Newspapers are dropped. Same conclusion, fake, staged, untrustworthy. Photographs of his family are left in the open for him to find, with handwritten messages begging him to come home. Onoda looks at the evidence in front of him and decides it's all an elaborate ruse. Why would the enemy go to such lengths if the war were truly over? To his mind, the lengths themselves were proof of the deception. So he keeps fighting. For years. Alongside him are 3 other soldiers who made the same choice, Private Yuichi Akatsu, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, and Private Kinshichi Kazuka. 4 men living off the land, stealing rice and bananas from local farmers, killing the farmers' cattle for meat, and occasionally exchanging gunfire with villagers and police they believed were enemy guerrillas in disguise. To them, the locals they were terrorizing weren't innocent civilians. They were the enemy. Every confrontation, every search party sent to find them, every loudspeaker announcement urging them to surrender, all of it just confirmed what they already believed. The war was still going on and they were still soldiers in it. Time does what time does. In 1949, Akatsu wanders off alone and eventually surrenders to Filipino forces, the first crack in the group. 6 years later, in 1954, Shimada is killed in a shootout with a search party sent specifically to find them. Now it's just 2 men left, Onoda and Kazuka. Picture that. 2 soldiers, in their 30s now, who have spent more of their adult lives in the jungle than out of it, watching their fellow soldiers fall away one by one, and somehow concluding each time that the mission must continue. Japan, by this point, has rebuilt itself almost beyond recognition. It's becoming an economic powerhouse. Tokyo is modernizing at lightning speed. And on a small island a few hundred miles away, 2 men are still living as if it's 1945, hiding from patrols, sharpening bayonets, watching the jungle for movement. In 1972, 27 years after the war ended, local police finally track down and shoot Kazuka during a confrontation. Onoda is now completely alone. One man fighting a war that the rest of the world has long since stopped fighting, that most people alive at the time weren't even born for. You'd think that would be the end of it. It almost was, eventually, but not the way you'd expect. In 1974, a Japanese college dropout and self-described adventurer named Norio Suzuki sets off on a trip with a strange personal checklist. He wants to find 3 things in this order: The abominable snowman, a panda, and Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, 2 out of 3 sound like fantasy. The third one, somehow, he actually finds. Suzuki tracks Onoda down on Lubeng and the 2 men talk. Onoda tells him plainly, he will not surrender unless his actual commanding officer personally orders him to. Not a leaflet, not a stranger, not the Japanese government. The man who gave the order in 1944 has to be the one to take it back. So Suzuki goes home and somehow convinces the Japanese government to take this seriously. They track down Onoda's old commanding officer, a man named Yoshimi Taniguchi, who by now isn't a soldier at all. He's a bookseller living a quiet civilian life, decades removed from the war. He's flown out to Lubeng. And on March 9, 1974, standing in the jungle in his now tattered, hand-repaired uniform, Hiroo Onoda receives the order he's been waiting 29 years to hear. Stand down, the war is over, go home. He salutes. He hands over his sword, the same one he carried the entire time, kept in usable condition for nearly 3 decades. He hands over his rifle, still functional, still ready to fire. And just like that, the longest individual holdout of World War II comes to an end, almost 30 years after everyone else had already gone home, fallen in love, raised children, rebuilt cities, and moved on with their lives. Onoda returns to Japan, and the country treats him like a ghost stepping out of history. Crowds gather. Reporters swarm him. He's given a hero's welcome, but underneath the celebration is something stranger and sadder. A man who has, in a very real sense, lost almost 30 years of his life to an order he never should have had to follow that long. The Japan he comes home to is unrecognizable. The streets are full of cars and television sets, and a kind of restless modern energy he doesn't know how to process. He says more than once that he doesn't feel like he belongs there anymore. So he leaves. He moves to Brazil and becomes a cattle rancher, trading one kind of isolation for another, choosing wide open land over crowded streets. Eventually he returns to Japan and finds a different purpose, running survival camps for young people, teaching discipline, self-reliance, and the kind of endurance that kept him alive for almost 3 decades in the jungle. It's almost as if the only way he can make peace with what happened to him is to turn it into something useful for someone else. He lived until 2014, dying at the age of 91, having spent his final decades as a strange kind of living monument, proof of how completely a person can be shaped and trapped by loyalty and belief. Proof of what happens when devotion to an order outlasts the war that order was given for. And that's really the haunting part of this story, isn't it? It's not really about a soldier hiding in a jungle. It's about how a single sentence, spoken by someone you trust, can rewrite the next 30 years of your life. It's about how easy it is to mistake stubbornness for loyalty, and how much evidence a person can ignore when admitting they were wrong feels more unbearable than almost anything else. Onoda wasn't crazy. He wasn't a fanatic in the way we usually imagine. He was, by most accounts, calm, disciplined, and rational, operating entirely within a logic that made complete sense to him, even as the rest of the world moved on without him. So the next time someone tells you they're certain about something, and they won't reconsider no matter what evidence is put in front of them, think about Hiroo Onoda standing in that jungle, looking at newspapers and family photographs, and deciding, again and again, that none of it was real. Because believing it was real meant admitting that everything he'd sacrificed had already stopped mattering, years and years before he was ready to let it go.